Hello, Cancer. Recording? Pretty good. Hello. Hello, Cancer, and welcome to the Sacred Space of Self. Your 2018 spring reading. Finally got some nice light going here, huh? It's getting dusky out there, and the sun has dropped below the building, and finally, the light finally has a little bit of depth and warmth to it. So, we're here with a reading of your solar chart. I'm doing something in each one of these readings, not assuming people are going to watch more than one, but that you might, which is giving a brief introduction to the solar chart while we're getting started. And that is one of the most frequent questions I get with these readings is, how is it possible that you're reading my Cancer horoscope and you're claiming I have Cancer rising, but really I've got Gemini rising or Leo rising or whatever it might be. The solar chart is an astrological device, an old one, used by public astrologers such as myself who write for large audiences and need to be able to say something about the astrology without having your natal chart, meaning we don't know your ascendant, don't know your natal planets. I might be writing for somebody 15 years old or 55 years old or 25 or 85. How is it possible to do that? And the way it's possible to do that is with this thing called the solar chart. And by solar chart, what I really mean is, I haven't said this yet. Do I have a yellow marker? We'll make the sun green. Here, let's draw the sun in. Is that somewhere in the sign Cancer is your sun, somewhere in here, which means that Cancer just gets first place, first house, whole sign. The whole sign Cancer is the whole first house. And then we just carry it through the zodiac. Leo, Virgo, Libra, etc., right around and back. And this is a symbolic chart, but all of astrology is symbolic. We could take the most perfectly timed natal chart. We have no idea how it actually works. And so you can say, well, the solar chart, that's ridiculous. But all of astrology is kind of ridiculous, and in the sense that, I can explain to you how this pen works. I can't really explain to you how an astrology chart actually works. I could make up a pretty good story about how that car outside my window works. A little gas gets into the cylinder, it explodes, pushes it up. This up and down motion is conveyed to the drive shaft, which turns the wheels, blah, blah, blah. Astrology? Who knows? Who can explain it? But what we get with the solar chart is a method of casting astrology where we can read for groups of people. And when this doesn't work, it's not about the solar chart. It's about the person reading. When astrology doesn't work, it's not about the chart. It's about the creativity, the talent, the experience, the skill, the imagination of the person reading. And so what we're doing with a solar chart is we're reading, but only reading transits. And the only presumed placement we're saying we know about is what's house one. So in the case of Cancer Sun, we're orienting the chart, that is to say, placing house one on the sign Cancer. You probably, if you know your birth time, you can definitely find your rising sign. If you know your rising sign, look up your rising sign, and you will get a different version of the same story. One of the things about astrology is we do a lot of telling different versions of the same story. In effect, by reading the same positions of the planets, only orienting it slightly differently. For example, for the Taurus chart, we just orient the chart on Taurus. It's going to be pretty much the same thing as the Cancer chart, oriented on Cancer, except that all the planets move 2 houses, and we get a whole other reading. So that all said, let's consider the Cancer solar chart. I've got two versions of each solar chart for this reading, and I want to start with something that you're unlikely to have heard anyplace else. If you look in an ephemeris or look on any chart for transits, look it up on the internet, whatever, look at the current sky, you're going to find no planets in the sign Cancer. There are asteroids and minor planets, but there are no major planets. There are everything's somewhere else. But there are two exceedingly important points in the sign Cancer, and they are of a kind that doesn't have a physical body. I always love explaining this. I always love saying this because it's like, that's completely bizarre. There are planets that don't exist anywhere except in the mind of astrologers and in computers and in ephemerides, these books that, and most don't have them. And they're imaginary. Basically, they come out of Germany in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. I heard that once interfered with the sound, which is still good. Good. I'm not wearing these goofy headphones, which I wear when I record my program. And there's two of them in Cancer, and this is important. There's only 8 of them, and they take like 20, 30 years, sometimes far longer, to go across your sign. And so had I not noticed that these things ring bells and tell stories, I wouldn't bother. But they're so so interesting. So there's one that's a longer placement. It's called Kronos. It's kind of a super Saturn. It's a little cross with a little shed over it, like all the crucifixes in the forest and in parking lots in Germany. All over Germany, you'll find crucifixes, and they put a little shed over them to keep Jesus dry. And this would, I don't think it's so much about that, but it just looks like that. What it actually stands for is your sense of relevance. Your sense of relevance. I would even say importance. But important gets into another shade of meaning that's kind of pretentious. But relevance, there's no pretense. Either something is relevant or it's not. It's meaningful in context or it's not. And the thing here is you. And this has been going through Cancer now for maybe like 10, 12 years. It's only gone like 10 degrees in that time. It takes forever to go across, which has come with a gradually increasing sense of your own relevance. The second point, and this process is not done. The second point, more newly arrived, kind of took me by surprise, but and it's kind of crazy how the points that can move the most slowly just sort of show up, and then the next thing you know, they're at 6 degrees, which is where Hades is. Another one of these points without a body that comes out of a German school of astrology called the Witte School in Germany from like 1920-30 is called Hades. And Hades is about getting to the bottom of things, and it's about taking things apart till you see their component parts. So there's something here about you having that ability, but also taking yourself apart till you see the basic components of who you are. Now, this is a long process, and it's almost as if it's the answer to any question you might have. Is to apply one of these two modes of analysis: relevance and components, importance and the depth, and in a sense the decomposition of your previous self-concept. Deep background. 99% of astrologers not paying attention to it. Even astrologers who are kind of descendants of the school called Uranian astrology, which this comes from, a lot can't stomach the fact that these points don't exist. And I think that they're fun, and there's 8 of them, and I just like to see where they show up. And right now, 2 of them are showing up in the sign Cancer. It's significant because there's not much else going on in Cancer. Now, we're really here today to talk about planetary retrogrades, in particular the retrograde of Mars, but we're going to look at the retrograde of Venus, which comes much later in the year. The retrograde of Mars starts less than a month from today, about 30 days from today. And for you, the retrograde of Mars is in your 8th solar house. The 8th house is sex, death, money, power, jealousy, secrets, control, and surrender. Slurpee. Sex, death, money, power, jealousy, secrets, control, surrender. The 8th house is here. Put a little 8 next to it. It looks like kind of 8 is kind of like an infinity. And this is basically the house of taboo. It's the house of everything you can't talk about at Thanksgiving dinner. It's also the house of the sex you want the very most. It is the house of bonding, of commitment, and of the exchange of resources, which means genetic resources and karma as well. This is where Mars is going to be retrograde. You have the sign Aquarius on the 8th solar house. To have Aquarius on the 8th solar house is a description of the way in which social patterns influence some of the deepest levels of exchange in your life, things that should not be subject to peer pressure but are, things that should not, in our day and age, be subject to family pressure but are, which is one illustration of why the sign Cancer is such an important sign when it comes to family. One thing I love about the solar house is that it describes the sign. For example, let's pretend we're describing the sign Cancer. And if you do a description of Leo on the 2nd for Cancer, you're going to expand the notion of the sign Cancer magnificently. Virgo on the 3rd talks about this deep intellectual quality that a lot of Cancerians have, an ability to analyze and to write. You think, well, Cancer is supposed to be such an emotional and intuitive sign, all about feeling. Why is it that people who are born under the sign Cancer can have this exceedingly strong gift for analysis? All right. Virgo on the 3rd. So the solar house is, in a sense, the mandala of the sign and the total explanation of what's going on in the sign. And when we get to house 8, we find out that the house of family and bonding and in-laws and shared resources and investments and money and inheritance is covered by Aquarius, and Aquarius is this thing that is subject to all of this group influence. And the first group is the family, and the first group, the family, influences the way that every other group manifests in our life. Almost any group you will enter, you will see a version of your family constellation manifest in that group. This is why group therapy is so interesting and so dangerous, and why people who do group therapy need to be fucking masters of therapy, because they need to be watching the way everyone else's constellation overlays with everyone else's constellation, which is your thing right now. You got to be watching the way your family constellation enters every group, and then the way everybody else's family constellation feeds in to those same groups, and people are playing all these different roles, such that at work you could be acting as someone's mother, but you could be someone's sister, and this guy could be your father, but that person's brother, and so on. And what Mars retrograde in this house is going to do is peel back the layers of influence for you, and in a sense render transparent, perhaps with some conflict involved, but render transparent the process of these influences and the way they have a way of hemming you in and preventing you from living out the relationships that you really want to do, because you're being influenced by so many other things that are essentially family patterns deeply encrypted into you. And it is very difficult to rewrite those patterns because of the way that they're kind of biologically implanted in the brain under one relatively modern theory that says that brain formation forms in the shape of the family pattern, and that's why the family pattern is so persistent. And Mars retrograde is going to open this up, and you will have your secrets revealed, your other people's secrets will be revealed to you, the secrets of the tribe or the group or the family will be revealed to you, and you will get to use this kind of vulnerable, sensitive moment to be able to create something new for yourself. And whatever is going on, it's vital that you stay in the space of creating something new, of becoming, of when a pattern that is not functional is revealed, that you begin to experiment with a pattern that is functional, no matter how uncomfortable it may feel, no matter how challenging, difficult it may feel, that you write a new story, that you conduct some experiment, that you say, what's the other side of this experience? When secrets come out, which they may already be doing, reveal them to yourself. That is the most important thing. And to your immediate intimate partners, that's the second most important thing. What happens on the group level is relevant, but not as relevant as the immediate group that you are part of. Right? If you're not really part of the group, it doesn't really matter that much. If you're really part of the group, then it matters a lot more. And there's not much in the way of groups that you are really part of. Relatively few that you are integral with. Now, one interesting element here is there's a double sexual element to this transit, because the 8th is the house of shared resources in the form of sex with committed conjugal partners, where there is often money involved. Money or deep secrets. That's how you know you're in the 8th house. There's sex, but there's not money and there's not deep secrets. It's not the 8th house. If there's sex involved, and there's a need for a clandestine operation, or there's the exchange of inheritance and wealth and that kind of thing, you know you're in the 8th house. And there's so much going on in the 8th house that hardly anybody can find their way through it, much less out of it, find their way around, much less out of it. And so you need to be very conscious where sex overlays with money. Where sex overlays with money, you are essentially talking about marriage. I mean, state of Colorado has a law that if two people live together and share the same bank account, they are married. So if you want to not be married in the state of Colorado, you have to keep separate bank accounts. There's another definition of marriage that I tend to favor, which is you have a child. And that creates a permanent kind of mutually shared genetic bond, makes people into relatives. That's very much an eighth house thing. If all you're doing is like having visitors in the art studio and playing, or you're a painter and you like to have sex with your artist models, whatever the case may be, this is the fifth house. It's pleasure, play, and creativity. And in the case of the fifth house, Mars rules Scorpio. Scorpio's there, Mars the ruler. Mars comes up, and so there's an intermingling of the themes of creativity, pleasure, play, fifth house sex, and sex, death, money, power, play, in-law, genetic material, sex of the eighth house. So this is a very interesting time for learning about the many facets and many possibilities of what sex can be and how it can manifest. By the way, another way you know you're in the eighth house is there are secrets. And where there are secrets, you know that you're in the realm of taboo. And when there are not secrets, you are not in the realm of taboo, because you can just talk about what you're doing and the fun that you are having. So for example, a play space like a swing club, that's not really the eighth house. That's a play space. It's the fifth house. It's the sexual equivalent of a climbing wall or fighting gym, where you're going to basically play a game, have fun. All right. So this is a quick overview of the retrograde, maybe a little bit more than quick. Let's take a look at a couple of, and by the way, Venus will be retrograde in your fifth later in the year, and that will re-emphasize the fifth house themes of your chart. All right. So we've covered Hades and Kronos. We've covered Mars retrograde. We've covered a little bit of Venus retrograde. I'm going to talk more about that in the mid-year reading. Let's put a couple of outer planets in the chart. Now, there's something about your chart that is relationally intense. And that is coming from Saturn and Pluto in the seventh. So the way a chart's oriented is you're here, they're all there, that's you, that's them, and them is really intense. Pluto is an intense motherfucker. Saturn means business. However you slice Saturn, Saturn means business. Planet of business, the planet of boundaries, the planet of, in your case, relationships and contracts. And you are going through a seemingly endless extended overhaul in your relationship, house 7. And what is crucial that you learn how not to do is that you don't take on the projections of others. The seventh houses. Let's while we're in such interesting territory of relationships, let's let me get a dog. She's laying on the floor. Let's get a big fat green Sharpie, and we are going to make a line and highlight what the astrologer Annie Black called the zone of projection. All of that. So if you think of yourself where the green is, if you think of yourself standing there in your chart, the ascendant, you can look up, you can look down, and you're basically going to see this region of the zodiac. Houses 5, 6, 7, and 8 are the zone of projection. And you've got stuff going on, particularly in houses 7 and 8, and you want to make sure that you are not taking on the projections of others. If you learn nothing else from this Mars retrograde, you will learn how not to take on the projections of others. Here's a more complex version of your chart. Let's add a few more thoughts here. And the way I did your reading a little bit backwards, looking more at the at what I'm calling the figure Mars retrograde in Aquarius than the ground, which is all the outer planets that are changing signs. But let's consider some of them right now and recognize that the story of what's going on with Mars retrograde in the 8th house and all this group stuff and all of this challenging of group values, particularly about taboo subject area, about secrets, is framed in a very wide context of what is going on in society. And society is going through a lot of upheavals and changes right now. Most of them are not acknowledged. They are going on below the boards, or they're not being noticed, or they're happening in the invisible environment. They're happening on levels that are either easy to overlook and ignore, or they are difficult to perceive at all. And one of the ways we perceive them is with the special instrument known as astrology. Astrology being a tool for peering into the invisible environment. We're going to look at a bunch of planets that are invisible planets. So far, the only planet we've mentioned you can actually see, well, Mars retrograde. And by the way, we will be able to see Mars is going to be high in the sky all night long, much of the summer. Saturn is visible. That's on your western horizon right now, and then pretty much most of the stuff I'm going to describe now are planets you need not only a telescope to see. In the case of Chiron, you need something like the Hubble telescope to see it. You need like a serious piece of equipment to see it. So let's start with Chiron on the 10th house. This, first of all, drops you into a spotlight. With all your secrets kind of out here with Mars retrograde, where people can maybe see them, you might not like the feeling of being in a spotlight, but this is a spotlight that is necessary for the leadership role that you are being groomed to take. And there are challenges involved, and there's an initiation involved with this Mars retrograde in the 8th house, because it is shifting something of your relationship to every group you could even ever imagine, from your family to your coworkers to your friends to your community to your larger society, and the patterns that form and that are difficult to break. And Chiron on the 10th puts you in the position I'm trying to not say the words thought leader because it's so fucking stupid, of the example of one who leads by differing. And therefore, when you differ, you are leading. When you stand up against the prevailing paradigm, you are leading. When you go against the majority, you are leading. When you refuse to conform, which you're doing a lot of these days, you are leading. When you have your own understanding of reality, you are leading. Chiron on the 10th is putting you in a leadership role, and additionally, specifically to the effect of being a maverick. A maverick is someone who does things differently because it's the right way to do things or the ethical way to do things. So I think the guy's name was Samuel Maverick, refused to brand his cattle. He thought it was cruel. So all the unbranded cattle belonged to Samuel Maverick. And then the word maverick became a thing. You're a maverick. You won't do what everyone else does. Chiron's first keyword is maverick. You have Chiron in the 10th house. Your power comes from being a maverick now at this point in your life. So notice the themes repeating themselves. There is clearly a maverick theme of Mars retrograde in Aquarius. You couldn't be more maverick than going against the grain of society with Mars in Aquarius. Okay, so Chiron reiterates that theme. Chiron emphasizes that theme. Let's look at another house. Very similar. Uranus in the 11th. The 11th is the house of groups, friends, and similar to Aquarius, but it's a little bit looser than Aquarius. Aquarius has this like overlay of rigidity, that the 11th house is more flexible, tolerant, benevolent, and generous. But they're similar, and they both deal with groups. But where you have Aquarius, it's more rigid. Now you have Taurus up here on the 11th, which is a fixed sign, like Aquarius, but it's Taurus is a little more generous than Aquarius is. Taurus is there's more of an exchange implied, and Taurus is a little bit like Aquarius in that it wants a measure of propriety and doing things the right way. Similar idea. But it's your concept, not the group's concept. Right? Aquarius is a dynamic between you and the group. Taurus is a dynamic within yourself where you have your personal traditions. You have your way of doing things. You have your sealing wax you still use to seal letters. You sign your name in a fountain pen. You have the things that you do. You have, where you have Taurus, you have the stuff that you feel defines you in your personal traditions. Like, I mean, I keep my school ring, my University of Buffalo school ring handy. This is a piece of my like Taurus personal tradition. Everyone has that, and where you have Taurus is on the 11th house, and so you want a measure of tradition and formality in your friendships. And now what you've got is Uranus, the planet of upheaval, revolution, and change and progress going on in your 11th house. And you're going to have that for 7 more years. It just began like 2 weeks ago, not even. And so there is a chance you have, an opportunity you have to define community your own way. A necessity, an obligation, a responsibility to define community your own way. And so you're going to be doing a lot of reinvention. And if we start to put together the maverick qualities of Saturn, of Chiron in the 10th in Aries, right? Aries being the sign of I am. Chiron being about maverick and being activating that I am in the most personal way with the Aries point right there, the first degree of Aries. This is where it's going on. And by the way, while we've got these themes of sexuality coming from the 5th Scorpio and the 8th Aquarius, there's a point called Salacia. Ta-da! The first time Salacia's ever been on the internet. YouTube, excuse me. Conjunct Chiron. It's going to take about a year more for Chiron to form its exact conjunction to Salacia. But it's warming up. And Salacia is about taking a a mature attitude towards sex rather than a scandal-driven or salacious attitude towards sex. So the culture's level of registering sexuality is salacious. Scandal rules the day. Gossip rules the day. Chiron conjunct Salacia is going to be about you taking some leadership on a healing process around sexuality wherein you are serving in the role of a maverick. This is a very close repeat of the themes of the 5th and the 8th with Aquarius and Mars retrograde, where you're a maverick, kind of going your own way, going backwards, and best of all, the traditional relationship points are themselves under focus and under question because their 7th house function, it's Capricorn, it's very serious and wants things to be a certain way and believes that there's the right way to do things. And structure of society is the structure of society, on and on. But except that Pluto's been there for 10 freaking years, churning up the way things were. And then Saturn comes along. Like, imagine Pluto just kind of demolishing things, and then Saturn comes along like a bulldozer and like makes them into a big pile, and you're like, well, what the fuck are we going to do with this big pile? And you do something with it. You maybe you recycle it, or you put it in a landfill, or somebody else hauls it off and builds another thing out of all the bricks, or some vintage brick person buys them from you for a lot of money and cleans them off and makes a whole new building out of it. All right, let's pick another. Let's end with something really important: spiritual life, inner life. The spiritual life is told by the 9th house. You have Pisces on the 9th house. That's another way of saying that you are naturally spiritual. And you're naturally spiritual in a way that you're likely to find perplexing the fact that people go and do something special to be spiritual. Like clean the streets on the first Saturday in April to like be spiritual. I'm going to do the right thing on the first Saturday in April. I'm going to go out and sweep with everyone else. Or go take a workshop. For you, life is the workshop. Life is the experience. The book is the journey, is the life that you live. You have right now 2 important points. 3, actually, let's not forget old Mr. Boris Cicci. If you want a cool article that's easily found on the internet, look up a piece called With Love from Boris Cicci. I wrote this in 2011, a week before Fukushima happened. And this is the whole story of your 8th house right now, your 9th, is about belief. What do you believe? What is true for you? And there is a real caution here about making sure that you do the work of making sure that what you believe is actually true for you, and not taking for granted the fact that you might believe something and therefore that makes it true. So when you encounter a belief, it's important that you question the belief and not just let the belief stand. So when you notice a belief that's like a little thing coming out of the background, out of the invisible environment, the thing to do with that is find out where it came from. The concern with Neptune in the 9th is a kind of it's about superstition, right? And superstition is, as Stevie Wonder says, it's believing in things that you don't understand. So you want to understand your beliefs. Now, one thing you've had Chiron going through this house for the last 8 years. It's now gone to your 10th. It's going to come back briefly late in the year into your 9th and go back into your 10th. The check the Aries, the Aries video, but in the Chiron video, which is serving as an introduction to this video series, I talk about the transition of Chiron from Pisces to Aries, and I look at the cycles that occurred in 1918, 1919, and 1968, 1969. Now we're in the 2018, 2019 transition. Happens every 50 years. This particular transition brings up a lot of fear. And so for you, spiritual issue number one is fear. The nature of fear, the origin of fear, what to do about fear, the power source of fear. Fear in any context. Read about fear, study about fear, learn about fear, observe fear in yourself. Not the most popular subject, but if you don't know and understand and do something about fear, it's going to have too much power, ridiculous amount of power in your life. And this you don't want, and fear is just misdirected energy. Finally, you come down to that and you learn how to guide yourself into thinking in a more holistic way. I do recognize I'm a writer, and I think that writing is really important to do. I mean, I would think so. I spend so much of my time doing it. I better think so anyway. But let me tell you why, and I'm Cancer rising, by the way, and so I'm talking about my own trip here in a lot of ways. Third house is the house that deals with ideas, communication, and writing. And you have this one of these mysterious, non-existent points without a body that astrologers love to hate, some of them anyway, or pretend it's not there, called Trans-Pluto. It's not one of the 8 WIT points, the trans-Neptunian points. It's its own thing concocted in the 1970s, but it's about holistic integration. You will do your most important work of integration by writing. So write morning pages, articles, blog posts, whatever it is that you can write it, publish it, get feedback, let it be part of your community, communal integration process. That's what I have to say to you tonight. Please check out your rising sign. Please check out the Art of Becoming, which I think was my masterpiece of annual editions. I wrote 66,000 words in 7 weeks. It came out a lot better than it should for writing 66,000 words in 7 weeks while writing the Daily News and a bunch of other stuff. It is a 6,000 word written analysis, and given the Trans-Pluto on your third, reading is important, and getting information in by reading. And so it's very inexpensive, and you will get as much as you'll get from a private consult with me, which is like a zillion times the price of that. And so I try to make sure that in this 45-minute reading, I concentrate a lot of useful stuff. Please share this if you know someone who might benefit from it, and check your rising sign. Kids, partners, you can check that. I work with this astrology on a level where I feel it's ethical to research others, so you understand something about maybe what's going on for them. All right. This is the first day I did 2 signs in one day. I also did Libra, so we are done with the cardinal signs. We'll have them all up on Sunday. I'll probably take I'll do maybe one tomorrow. I'm going to do Planet Waves FM, sit right here at this microphone wearing these lovely AKG Austrian headphones. And anyway, a pleasure to serve you. Thanks for trusting me as your astrologer. Love. Bye for now.